Thank you so much for being with us today. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Catholic Faculty Series. I'm Colin Hoke, the Education Coordinator here at Thomas More, and I'm pleased to be joined by Assistant Professor Lloyd Sy of the Yale English Department. Professor Sy is a specialist in Native American literature, environmental literature, and early American literature. Many of you might recognize him as a member of the Thomas More community, but also a two-time Jeopardy champion and a Champions Wildcard semifinalist. We never had that here. Over the course of the evening, we'll get to know Professor Sy better through a series of questions. Questions which explore the relationship between the Catholic faith and his scholarship. Before we do that, however, I'd like to draw your attention to the QR code at your tables at the center. This QR code leads to a brief survey. If you'd be so kind, please let us know what you think about this program and how we might be able to improve it in the future. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started getting to know Professor Sy. So what can you tell us about your family background and how it informed your understanding of the Catholic faith as a child?
This works, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it works.
You can hear me? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. My family background, how it informed my Catholic faith. Oh, okay. My parents are from the Philippines. This is a common enough background for people who are Roman Catholic. So, you know, it's like 7,000 generations of Filipinos who are Catholic. And so it wasn't so much, it was just like in my blood, right? I think at that point it becomes part of your DNA. You know, I'm not a biologist, not a geneticist, but I believe that after several generations, you just become genetically Catholic, right? So yeah, my mom is ethnically Filipino. My father is ethnically Chinese, but they're both from the Philippines, and they moved at some point to America. Sorry, this is not a very streamlined answer. This is to a very simple question. Sorry, Colin. They moved to America in 1991. I was born in 1994 in Evanston, Illinois. I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which is about 1 hour west of Evanston. And there are a lot of Catholics there. There are a lot of Filipinos there. We got probably like 1,000 Filipinos in Rockford. And so I didn't just have a Catholic family going to Mass every week, going through my sporadic religious education. I had a whole Catholic community that met every single week, that prayed the rosary at a rotating system of houses in the Rockford area, with, of course, plenty of Filipino food afterwards. And yeah, that is the family that raised me. Did I miss any part of the question? Sorry, I wasn't like listening as closely as I should have been.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I mean, would you say that Catholicism, given that there's so many Filipinos in the area, was part of the culture, very much so in where you grew up?
Yeah, it is. I mean, what is Rockford? Rockford is a city full of Polish people and Irish people. And these like newfangled Filipinos as well. So yeah. You know, like our best. The high school that has the best football team is a Catholic school, right? Classic sort of thing. I didn't go to that high school, but we could talk about that some more. But yeah, it's there. It's bred in the bone alongside the Swedish Lutherans in Rockford. Yeah, Catholicism is plenty there. But yeah, you know, like what do I want to say? Like, I think I just sort of assumed a kind of Catholicism was salient when I was growing up, because up until the moment I was like 7 or 8, like everyone I knew in the world was Catholic. I didn't even know there was like another religion out there that wasn't Catholic. It's just habit. It's always been habit. This we might talk about more too. Okay. Yeah.
Sure. So my question then becomes, when did you first become interested in Native American literature? When did you first get that inclination? Was it some sort of media or literature? Given that you had, you know, given that you were surrounded by Catholicism, perhaps. I mean, what was the first impetus towards your field?
Towards Native literature, yeah. I mean, it came way later than my knowledge of Catholicism. Yeah. Not until I was in grad school did I really get interested in Native cultures, in Native literature. And so there's a whole involved story there. But I got my Ph.D. at the University of Virginia. I came into the University of Virginia in 2017, an eventful time in Charlottesville. I came in and had no inkling that I would ever study Native literature. I'll tell you what I was. I was somebody who liked reading novels. I liked reading 19th century novels especially. I grew up sort of loving Victorian novels, and then by the time I got to grad school, I knew I wanted to do American literature, 19th century American literature, but I didn't know that I had any real stakes in native cultures. But what happened? I decided to write a dissertation about forests, sort of by accident. The woman who I ended up working with as my advisor, she asked me out of the blue what I was going to write about, and I didn't have a good answer. But 3 weeks before that conversation, I had a very quick inkling of a premonition that perhaps it would be kind of cool to write a dissertation about deforestation in the 19th century. I'm like, oh, that would be a cool project. And so that inkling rose up in that moment of panic with my future advisor. And with a ton of confidence, I was like, I'm definitely going to write about deforestation. And she's like, oh, that's a great idea. Go and read about that for a month. And so I did. And upon reading about it for a month, I think it became clear to me that the most interesting way to look at the problem was to look at it through the voices of underappreciated and underread native writers. It had been done before in a kind of classic Thoreauvian, Emersonian, Whitmanian, Thoreau, Emerson, Whitman, James Fenimore Cooper, all these things. We had thought about their environmental critique before, or their environmental, I don't know how you put it, ethic, right? But what remained underappreciated, I found in my literature review, was the native and indigenous writers of the 19th century. So it became not only maybe the more ethical dissertation to write, but thoroughly the more interesting dissertation to write. And that's where it began. Now, it began there, but I think that in some ways, and maybe this is just retrospective fitting, I found upon reading these literatures that I kind of loved these writers. Before I even really knew them, I loved them. I found that there was so much in their experience that resonated with me. I found that it was really useful and vital to be thinking about place in relationship to them, and that their relationship with homeland, with alienation, with exile, all these sort of classic parts of Native experience, was not something I was totally unfamiliar with. Of course, I don't want to claim something like a perfect alignment with the thought of the subjects of my research, the objects of my research. They are 25 times smarter than I could ever be, but they found so much more there that I had been looking for, and so the project became an exciting project in personal ways as well. Okay, I hope that made sense.
Could you speak to the personal ways that it became exciting? So can you potentially relate it to your own background, potentially,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what can you say about native cultures in the United States, right? They are distinct cultures that have been thoroughly influenced, and many would say over-influenced, by the dominant Euro-American culture that sits next to, or sits on top of, depending on how you want to talk about it, the native cultures of the country. I think you could also say the same about Filipino culture, correct? Right? A country colonized by the United States beginning in the early 20th century, a profoundly Americanized country, a country that loves America. Yeah, I mean, I love America. To be clear, I'm not a non-patriot. But yeah, it's about this shared, I think, recognition of what it's like to perhaps occupy two cultures at once, right? With one of those cultures being the really, really effectively powerful American culture. Yeah. But it goes beyond that too. So for instance, I wrote a chapter on this Pequot guy named William Apess. He was born maybe like an hour from here. And he writes a lot about his adoption into a different native tribe, the Mashpee tribe. And so for about 6 months of my life, I did nothing but study adoption. There's a topic that I think is relatable to anyone, but it was perhaps most relatable to me, somebody who always felt like something of an adopted son of this land that was not my parents' land. Now, surely I'm talking about something that many people in this room have experienced, a sense of uncertain, but perhaps also effectively, like very affectively moving adoption by a place that, while perhaps not initially yours, became yours, right? So in APES, in writing about that, and me in researching APES writing about that, yeah, I think I got to a very personally affecting relationship to the text. Also, I mean, you know this. You spend like a lot of time doing anything, it becomes part of your personal life, sure. Right? You just sit with any kind of materials for a year, 2 years.
I'm always convinced that we actually study ourselves.
Okay.
When it comes to higher education, when it comes to what you decide to do your master's on, your dissertation on, there's always something within yourself that's, pushing you to that subject. But I want to ask about how your faith relates to this. So, does your faith influence the way you think about native writers and indigenous writers? Mm-hmm. And in your opinion and your expertise, is there a kind of Catholic approach to thinking about these genres?
There are, yeah. Now, there's sort of some interesting, coincidences, or I don't know what you'd call them. Several of the native writers I work with were avowedly Catholic. Who's to say the extent to which they were Catholic? But, for instance, I work with this Potawatomi guy named Simon Pokagon. I work with the legendary Yankton Sioux author Zitkala Shah. Both these people were avowedly Catholic. And it seems like fairly practicing Catholics, though perhaps like all of us, imperfectly practicing Catholics. And so there's a direct kind of study of Catholic natives in the project that I work on. But I think that the more interesting answer is probably a kind of spiritual question that has nothing to do with their work or their lives. It's just sort of like, how has my dissertation writing, how has my book project writing been Catholic somehow, Yeah. And I was thinking about that in Mass today, 25 minutes ago. I was thinking about it as I listened to the first reading. The first reading ends with this amazing line to hear right before you give a talk, which is, don't judge a man before he speaks. That is where he is. He truly shows. That's where people show themselves. Horrifying to hear. I think I was thinking a little bit about. Oh, I had it better in church, man. I think I was thinking a little bit about mystery. This is not going to be a great answer to your question directly, but I have been thinking a lot about artificial intelligence over the last week or so. And I've been thinking about how there's an extremely troubling thing that AI can do, which is fulfill your prompts perfectly, right? There's this whole new field of prompt engineering. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this. Presumably, like in every college in America, half of you are studying computer science. But there's this new field of prompt engineering in which what you're trying to engineer is not, say, software, but rather the perfect prompts to get AI to do what you want it to do, right? And I myself have gotten fairly good at prompting AI to do the things I want it to do, and it strikes me that we're going to get to a point where we're all really good prompt engineers. Okay, so I promise I'll bring this home to Catholicism. Catholics come home eventually.
I'm going to prompt you, so
yes,
to bring it home.
Bring it back. Let me change the vocabulary a little bit on what I was saying. AI will, in due time, become extremely good at giving us exactly what we pray for, right? We provide exactly what we want to see. We petition AI for a thing. It gives it back to us. And this isn't just copy editing or, adding some numbers. It's if you want to simulate some version of your life and you give AI those parameters, increasingly it will spit out back at you exactly what you want to live through, quote unquote, right? This is troubling to me, and I think it troubles me because I'm Catholic. I think it troubles me because I think I have grown up with the expectation and the mantra that your prayers will always be answered, but not exactly the way that you prompt God, right? You see, I brought it home. Yeah. The second reading was 1 Corinthians, right? One of my favorite Bible verses is 1 Corinthians 12:31 in the King James Version. Covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet show I unto you a more excellent way. Right? Give me whatever your best prompt is, and I will give you something even better, right? Better than your expectations. Okay, so now let me take this home to my work. I think that at its best and at its most rewarding, my scholarship has aimed to strike at something that's mysterious. I begin with, say, a prayer that, wow, this book, this novel is super intriguing and super weird, and I don't know what to do with it. But if I dig at it, if I give myself to it over the next few months or years or whatever it might be, something will come of it. And you know this, all scholars know this. You never end up exactly where you think you're going to end up. I mean, all people know this, right? You never exactly end up where you think you're going to end up. Okay. Whew.
Yeah, so that was voluminous, right? So on the subject of caution, right? You talked about the caution with AI. I was thinking about caution in relation to your work and your literature. So what would you say some of the cultural sensitivities and awarenesses that you have to have studying Native American literature?
There may be no field where positionality and acknowledging positionality is more important than Native American studies. And of course, it's vitally important if you are not Native yourself, which I am not. So as a settler scholar, as a non-Native scholar working on Native literature, the question of ethically pursuing the field is almost equivalent to the field itself, right? Which is fine, because if you occupy American land, you occupy ancestral homelands of different Native nations, I mean, you're always implicated in the question of positionality. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a great answer to the question other than it's something that, if you should just think about it, right? Like, if you want to work on behalf of others, Native communities, if you want to work on Native materials, like I do, right? I have found that I've never felt for a second unwelcome because I'm non-Indigenous, But I have constantly felt the imperative and the desire to interrogate my positionality with respect to the field. It's a totally rewarding thing to do, to think about it. So I think that the main ethical imperative is just to think about it, and to acknowledge where your gaps are, where you sit in a position of relative privilege, or you sit in a position of familiarity or alienation with regards to the stuff.
Well, let's talk about the familiarity and alienation thing.
Great.
So you described your interest in literature to me as a search for what it means to belong or not belong in a place, and how texts represent that, either through restorative potential or their fractures. So how, in your opinion, your expertise, can Native and Indigenous texts express belonging or not belonging?
Oh, great. Did I say that? Yeah. Well,
You did say that.
How can they express... Oh, yeah. All right. Well, I think this actually gets to... I told you guys that I decided to write a dissertation about deforestation in 19th century Native American literature. One of those very specific, arcane dissertation topics. If you just think about the consideration of deforestation in literature, I think that you might expect it to be a very sad story, right? You can sort of see the kind of primary argument that my project wishes to make, which is that Native writers write about deforestation, and in thinking about how those forests get cut down in their traditional lands, it stands in for a kind of imposition of a settler colonial state, right? It stands in for all sorts of racism and oppression. It stands in for a true spiritual fracture, right? So I think fracture is not hard to find in this literature. Since I've been investigating this topic, since I've been reading into this topic, what I found just as saliently, but much more surprisingly, is that there is also a heavy dose of belonging in these texts. a heavy dose of hope in these texts, right? So shockingly, to write and to encounter environmental destruction is not purely a kind of mournful activity, right? I find that when these writers write about them, they immediately discover the potential that results in the aftermath of the horrible destruction, right? Oh, it's horrible that the tree gets cut down, but then practically a paragraph later, the next move is, but yet we can build something out of this, right? Yet we can generate something out of this. And what they draw on, I find consistently and movingly, is this strong impulse to form community and form belonging in Native communities, not just Native communities, right? Filipinos too, and any number of communities, and they draw on that long-standing tradition to make belonging, to rebuild in the aftermath of something like environmental catastrophe, right? And that is important, right? For us living in a period of environmental catastrophe ourselves, and wondering how to rebuild or build lives in such a situation. Yeah.
So you've hit it there. But the important context is sort of the shape of the forest to come.
That is the name of the book.
That is the name of the book, right? So it clues you into what he's talking about the hope for creation out of destruction, the generative environments of native U.S. literature. So I was thinking about also ecology in this and the role of ecology more broadly in your work and how it relates to the faith. So how is your knowledge of Native American literature and the different ways they conceptualize ecology, has it influenced the way you think about our Catholic tradition and its ecological tradition? For example, biblical ecology. We had a series on Francis of Assisi not too long ago and his creation mysticism, Catholic social teaching, Laudato Si. So it seems to me there's a lot of overlap between the Native American traditions with respect to ecology and the Catholic tradition with respect to the idea that we are imbued with a stewardship. We're given a stewardship. So what do you think?
Yeah. Pope Francis's ideas in Laudato Si are taken from indigenous thinkers. I know this because Pope Francis says so himself in Laudato Si, right? He says, these ideas that I'm presenting about sustainability and stewardship are indigenous ideas. And so indigenous peoples of the world hold a particular place and must be listened to. So, I'm not accusing Pope Francis of any sort of plagiarism. He literally tells us where his ideas come from, right? And I think it makes sense. I don't know, as I said, I am by no means a perfectly practicing Catholic, so I got very nervous before this interview. I am not a theologian. I mean, I'm barely a logian. I had to research what it actually means to be a Catholic. You guys know the Protestants only have 2 sacraments? I'm just learning all sorts of things this morning. I'm just kidding. Just faith, not works? Sorry, so I was saying, okay, but I think that the idea of stewardship is not crazy to any of us, right? Does anyone feel like Catholicism is telling us to go out there and destroy the world? I don't think that's how we're called to live. I don't think that I have, again, I'm not a logian, but when I see people in the faith who I think are doing it well, they are usually not ransacking oil fields, they are usually not cutting down forests, right? When I see beauty among the faithful, I see a vision that's completely in accordance with a world of sustainability and stewardship. So I don't think one has to go very far. And again, neither does Pope Francis. It's the kind of links between a Catholic ecology and an indigenous ecology are obvious. It's hard to not see them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense given that our Pope is a South American Jesuit, right? He's intimately connected, right, with that world in a way that many North Americans have lost touch with. So, in addition to your literature studies, right, you're also a film buff, right? You do film studies as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's a badge of honor. So what would you say your favorite films are related to Native American subjects, early American subjects, Western subjects? I mean, I love Westerns, ecological subjects. And which of these would you recommend for an educated Catholic audience?
Okay, yeah, that's okay. There are a lot of different kind of movies, right? Yeah.
Oh, your ballpark.
One of the things whenever you study, like you get a PhD, you come to learn very quickly just how little you know, right? So film buff is terrifying because I know people who know 55 times more movies than I do. But yeah, I don't know. So when I thought about this question, the first thing that came to mind is this, the lovely Terrence Malick movie, The New World, right? I know I feel like Catholics really like the kind of recent Malick stuff, like I forget what they're called.
Tree of Life, right?
Yeah, the Tree of Life. No,
Thin Red Line, Tree of Life.
Yeah. But The New World, this Malickian retelling of the Pocahontas, John Smith. We way better than the Disney. It is just so beautiful, right? A gorgeous movie. Western movies. Oh my goodness! What a rich American tradition we have of telling the West, telling it wrong all the time, but always fascinatingly, right? I love a John Wayne movie. I really do. But it also offers so much fodder for me as a scholar of Native literature to critique a John Wayne movie. But yeah, you guys haven't seen, sorry, at this point we're just talking about movies. Like, you guys haven't seen Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, right? Or Stagecoach, or, The Searchers, right? Like, these are just like, what movie should Catholics watch? Great movies that everyone should watch. Not, there's nothing about being Catholic that means you have to watch this particular movie. We can go on and on. Ordette. You guys know Ordette? Carl Dreyer's movie, Ordette. The great movies of Ingmar Bergman. Great movies of Eric Romer. Okay, sorry. I'm just at this point, I'm just showing off. So
don't be sorry I asked. Yeah. You're good. You're good. You're good. Now, I was thinking like Last of the Mohicans and Hostiles, and there's some really good newer stuff as well. I was thinking about American Primeval, as we were talking,
Sure.
Great new Western that deals with these issues. I think your point about The Searchers and John Wayne and this classic American tradition, the mythos of the West being such a prominent part of our American psyche, is enduring. But I think we're starting to approach these subjects with much more balance than we used to, right? We've kind of crested that hill. We're addressing Native American concerns much more in these films than we used to, right? So that's what I was having in mind to that.
Yeah, absolutely, right? You guys, did you see the Scorsese movie from 2 years ago, Killers of the Flower Moon, right?
Great movie.
Yeah, with a wonderful star turn by Lily Gladstone. It's so exciting, right? We're in a really exciting moment in Native film. And it's, I think there's no end to the number of really talented Native filmmakers that have been producing films for, decades at this point. I have real particular fondness for this guy, Sterling Harjo. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but there's an FX show called Reservation Dogs, which is just about the best TV that's ever been made. And he made some earlier movies that are also fantastic. He's Muskogee Creek. Also, don't forget our neighbors to the north. Yeah, like Canadian Indigenous film is incredible. Okay, yeah.
Do you have recommendations for it?
Yeah. The documentaries of Alanis Obomsawin, who is, I forget what tribe or what First Nations she's part of. But yeah, then there's this other movie called The Fast Runner. It's got an Inuit name too, Aitanurajit, something like that. Fast Runner, weird, great movie that directly counteracts some of the very problematic, racist Inuit documentaries of the early 20th century. Let me try to give a summative thing that's not just me listing off films, right? There is so much indigenous creativity, right? I work with the 19th century kind of version of it, but one of the most persistent and horrible kind of conceptions of Native culture is that it's gone, right? Is that it's that they were honorable culture that is no longer around. Absolutely not. No, Native people are still around today. There's a great myth of total dispossession, but no, Native creators are still creating, right? And in fact, actually, right now we are in the period of most flowering. am jealous of the people I know who work on 21st century native literature, because they have like 4 times as many books as I do to work on, right? So yes, and film, oh God, the best artistic medium there is a medium where I think the vibrancy of indigenous creation is most evident, right? So, okay. Yeah.
That's great. I'm glad you brought up Killers of the Flower Moon, too. That's a fantastic movie. So let's change gears and talk about your 2-time Jeopardy championship here in 2023. I admit I was stretching to figure out a way to connect this to our Catholic faith. I was thinking, okay, all right, systematizing knowledge, Thomism, scholasticism, how does that work? Trivia. That's got a background in medieval Catholicism. But obviously that seems far-fetched. So the question is, how do you relate it to your Catholic faith? Is there a connection at all?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like that's what you said, Thomism, or what are the other things? Let's go with that.
The search to systematize,
The search to
right?
systematize,
To document
yeah.
all human knowledge.
Right. Yeah, the Summa. I mean, it's sort of embarrassing. Like, I think there were like 2 Bible questions, and I didn't get either while I was on there. I was like, what? Do you
remember what they were?
Yeah, I do. Of course, I remember. I remember the ones I got wrong way more than the ones I got right. There was a question on Baal. And I said Moloch.
B-A-A-L. Yeah.
B-A-A-L, and I said Moloch, which to this day, I'm like, my goodness, I got possessed. It was horrible. Of course I know Baal. And then there was a question about, oh my God, I'm missing it right now. The Goliath was part of these people.
Philistines.
The Philistines, thank you. Mm-hmm. See, I didn't remember it then, nor did I remember it now. So, yeah. I think I might have gotten a Samson question the 3rd time I went on. But anyway, so, can I relate it to my faith? I mean, I like learning a lot, and so much of my learning has, I don't know, like, the Bible has long been a thing that I've wanted to learn about. So I guess that, like, insofar as a habit of reading was inculcated into me from a young age because of, the importance of reading and of textual study in our tradition, in our faith, I guess it opened up like a real, respect for knowledge or reverence for knowledge, a desire to know more and to fit it into some sort of systematic, a systematic presentation of the world. Yeah. I prayed before I went on, I prayed to not embarrass myself, to make it to Final Jeopardy. The prayer was answered in a better way than I expected. So, yeah.
So you framed your success, right? You prepped with prayer, and you framed your success, right, in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Look, I was thinking a lot about humility during church, but I have this persistent problem with humility, which is that the moment I think we all have this issue with humility. The moment you aim for humility, it's like, oh no, that's pretty prideful, right? But I mean,
this guy I think he is, that he's more humble than me.
I know, right? So success, was it success, or how else to describe something as fortunate as winning Jeopardy as anything other than grace, right? It's like you go on. It's there's so many. If you guys know the show, right? There are certain people who are incredible at this game, right? Holzhauer or Ken Jennings, right? And they go on and they win based on skill. But most of us who are winning based on some combination of factors that just happen to go in our favor. My Final Jeopardy the first day was a literature Final Jeopardy, and that to me, okay, I don't think God meddles with Jeopardy, but so much in my life feels given, not earned. And I mean that in a very humble way. Yes. So any success that happens on the show, for me, purely a result of grace. I really do, I think, believe that. Yeah.
So at this time, we want to open up the floor for questions. We've got a mic here. If anyone would like to come up and ask Professor Sy a question. Thank you so much. Come on forward.
Yeah, this is very brave, you know, like you gotta walk up to ask the question. Like, I would never.
So I had a question about, I feel like the kind of Catholic concept of sustainability and stewardship kind of goes back to like creation story and kind of like God giving us a garden that we tend to. But I feel like tied to that is this kind of still idea of like ownership, like it's ours to own, and like why would we destroy our own garden? Whereas I'm not an expert in Native American spirituality, but I feel like it's not so much about ownership in their understanding. So I wonder if you could kind of contrast that idea of like sustainability, stewardship, ownership versus the more maybe Native American conception of that. Thanks.
Yeah. No worries. Sorry, what's your name? You can just scream it.
My name's Curtis.
Curtis.
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. You know, I think the thing I'd say is that I don't think the vocabulary is it's not inapplicable to Native philosophy and Native thought, right? You're right. I mean, and I think that very frequently we can read the Adam story as a story that endorses a kind of settler colonialism, right? Like there's a kind of real dominion that man's given that I think can easily be taken to an extreme, right? And so you can also sort of backread the settler colonial story onto Adam, right? But yeah, I mean, I think that an intelligent reading of the story recognizes the distinction between ownership and stewardship, right? Recognizes the kind of faculty of reason given to human beings, and taking that as not say a justification, but using that as a way to place responsibility on stewardship on human beings, and I will just say that like Native peoples, you cannot speak for all Native peoples, of course, right? But it's not like Native peoples don't believe in ownership exactly, right? Like there are lots of arguments about the distinctions, right? There's a sense of a slightly more communal version of ownership among Native peoples, but you know, one of the points that I'm insistent to make in my work is that it's not like you know, Euro-American settlers cut down forests and Native peoples don't cut down trees, right? Of course, Native people cut down trees. Like they, you know, you have to be alive as a human being. You have to cut down trees, right? Like you need them for fuel, you need them for construction, you need them for canoes, you need them for books, right? And so there's a way in which the ethos of Native peoples has not crept into the kind of more, say, nefarious forms of ownership as it has in, you know, slightly more capitalistic Euro-American traditions. And again, I'm being reductive here. You know, this is a more nuanced conversation. But yeah, I guess to return to my initial point, right? Like I think that everyone is capable of being abusive towards the environment, and I think everyone's also capable of stewardship. Native cultures have tended in general to be more contained in their interaction with the environment. They have tended more towards an ethic of stewardship and sustainability. That's not to say that everyone has. It's not to say, of course, that you know white people can't be stewards, or that you know there's a kind of racially specific version of stewardship. No. So. Okay, sorry. That was a long and perhaps unorganized answer to your question, Curtis.
I like resisting the idea to kind of make Native Americans monolithic, right?
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
Any further questions? Casey, come on up.
Oh, you had such a wonderful reflection. Yes.
I have really enjoyed hearing you talk about the role of the natural world and the environment, not only kind of in thinking about stumbling into a dissertation on forestry, but also in the writers that you work with and the films that you had mentioned. And I'm curious for you as a scholar who works on a lot of work that is really closely tied to the natural world, if you have like favorite places, sort of I'm from Montana, so I'm like biased to seeking a forest in need of a sort of like spiritual refresh. So I'm curious if there's places in the natural world that do that for you.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to give a glib answer and perhaps attempt a real answer. Although I write on forests, I don't particularly like going outdoors. Okay. I write about textual forests, which means I read books. Books are read primarily indoors. Libraries are not outdoor spaces, right? I'm hermetic. I'm an introvert, you know. Okay, so that being said, in general, I'd be happier in the dark stacks. That's a restorative thing for me. That's the restorative environment for me. No, but there are so many places that are quite lovely. I love where I'm from. You know, I'm from Rockford, Illinois. It's actually, you know, the nickname of the city is quote unquote the forest city. Just strange. Like, I mean, we have forests, as many forests as anyone else, though. You know, it's not like there's no preternatural number of forests in Rockford. But I love going home, right? I love going home, and I love being in the parks there, I guess. You know, they remind me of my childhood, you know. But where else? I don't know. I mean, it all is occasionally, I come across nature, and it's hard to resist it, right? So although I began this answer by telling you that I despise the outdoors, which is not true, sometimes nature just kicks you when you're looking at it, right? You know, like that waterfall is really nice. I think we could describe those moments as moments of this, you know, of the divine, right? Those are great arguments for stewardship and sustainability. Yeah.
That's a great question. Any other questions? All right, would everyone join me in thanking Professor Sy for joining us tonight? So once again, thank you for joining us this evening at St. Thomas More for our Catholic Faculty Series. Please be sure to let us know what you think of our program via the QR code on your table there. And be sure to mark your calendars as well for our upcoming Golden Lecture on Faith and Science on March 30th, featuring Sister Ilia Dilio of Villanova University, a prominent voice in the fields of theology, neuroscience, and quantum physics. Her lecture will be titled Thinking with Teilhard de Chardin, Why Science and Religion Need Each Other. Finally, good evening and God bless. Thank you again.